Hello, it's me, Brad, again, with our penultimate episode of A Case of Good News. Now, if you're a dictionary snob, you would know that penultimate means the next to last episode, which means, spoiler alert, next week we will be concluding, at least for now, A Case of Good News. It's going to be an awesome episode. I can't wait. But today, we have a wonderful show. Two wonderful stories that are connected to one theme, I think, that's fun. Do you remember that game, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? You had three options if you really got stumped, and one of them was phone a friend. Well, that is going to be our theme today. But before we get into those stories, let's hear some good news from our lady in cheese, Miss Jewel. Jewel?
Hello, everyone. If you ask people who work in our community, the majority of them will say the thing they love the most is a sense of collaboration. We generally like each other, and we want to see each other succeed. It's easy, though, to experience feelings of self-preservation during these times. But what we are here to remind you of is the fact that cheese people truly are the best people. Friends, allow me to get back to you with a case of good news. With unemployment rates at an all-time high, an already exhausted system to provide food for families and individuals in need became completely overwhelmed. And despite there actually being enough food available, logistics and economics frequently gets in the way. Two American producers impacted by the pandemic themselves, though, decided to step up and give back to those in need with a high-quality protein diet, cheese. The American cheese industry may be younger than its European ancestors, but it is rich in history, built by women who paved the way with their beautiful goat's milk cheeses. But with restaurants closed, these producers were heavy with a highly perishable product and nowhere to send it to, and difficult conversations to have with their dairy producers. Would they have to stop buying milk? What about those families? An American treasure in Louisville, Kentucky said, "Not on my watch." With concerns for public safety, many businesses turn to established delivery services in order to get food in their customers' hands. But with maybe only one or two employees and limited infrastructure, this option may cause more harm than good for some really small businesses. A small but mighty cheesemonger in Richmond, Virginia knew that she could maintain social distancing and still deliver smiles and cheese to her customers by grabbing her running shoes. Summer is coming, the grass is green, and so I'd like to introduce this week's Ruminant Check-In. How them ruminants doing out there, Chris?
Yeah, they're looking pretty good.
Thanks, Chris. Times are hard, and this won't fix the problem, but I prescribe 5 minutes of #lamb cuddles, in person or digitally, the next time you need a mental break. Back to you, Brad.
Thank you, Jewel, for that great news. Now let's go to our next story. We crossed the pond to England and talked to Joe Schneider and Jason Hinds. Now, Joe is the maker of raw milk Stichelton, the only raw milk version of Stilton that I know of. And Jason Hinds is with Neal's Yard Dairy as well as Essex Street Cheese. He's somebody we all know, and he's got his hands in a lot of different things. It's his network of friends that is really at the heart of this next story. Hey guys, how is sunny old England, apparently?
It is sunny. That's extraordinary, isn't it?
It's pastoral where Jason is. Jesus.
And it has been unseasonably benign and beautiful for weeks on end. All right, there we go. Joe's showing off now.
Wow, you guys know we're talking about the good news, and it's hard when there's a pandemic and a lot of bad things going on. And you guys experienced a lot of turmoil, anxiety, and all of that. But that's why we have you on. We want to share the story, Joe and Jason, about what it was like from the cheesemaker point of view, and then how someone like Jason and the distributor who's servicing all the restaurants and beyond was able to handle that, take all the questions and come up with a solution.
Well, it's been a roller coaster ride since whenever it was, mid-March. We had to stop making cheese. about 10 weeks ago. When the lockdown happened in Britain, we had a storeroom full of ripe cheese that wasn't going to hang around for very long. And pretty much overnight, our markets evaporated. Restaurants closed. The European markets were closing. Export to the US was closing down. And even shops and delis in the UK were finding it difficult to remain open in their wonted style. It took a while for people to sort of reinvent themselves and their business model. And NYD did that brilliantly, and we did that very poorly. We're very static, maybe as a group of cheesemakers, but certainly I wasn't very flexible. So my model is to make cheese and then give it to someone else to sell. So the idea of trying to do that ourselves was daunting. We tried a little bit of e-commerce, and that's been helpful. But really, the good news for us started a few weeks after the lockdown, when Neal's Yard Dairy completely reinvented their e-commerce mail order model. It just exploded. And then I remember Jason calling me. Was it in late March or early April, Jason? I can't remember.
Late March, yeah.
Late March. He was going to have a discussion with Jamie Oliver about this idea of promoting British cheeses, and it eventually developed into the idea of this box called Save British Cheese box. And we were in the first selection. So there were 3 cheeses in a box. Jamie Oliver came on his Instagram and did a little, 2-minute video. And I think Jason said, I think we'll sell 2,500 of these boxes in a week. And they sold 2,500 boxes in 3 hours. It's completely gone. So for us, that's 90 cheeses. That's, 270. I can't do the math right now. It's almost a ton gone completely. Wow. 700 kilos. And that was amazing. That sort of, first of all, the flush of sales, fantastic. But also the response we got was really uplifting. I mean, emotionally, that was more important to me than the money in my bank account, because just the fact that so many people out there cared enough to click on the site and buy our box of cheese was amazing. And then after that, there was sort of a rolling effect. It wasn't the Jamie Oliver box, but Neal's Yard Dairy, their mail order exploded on the back of that, and our orders started to go up. So we've been selling cheese at a good clip now. So that is the good news. But without that sort of impetus from Neal's Yard Dairy and Jamie Oliver, we would have been throwing cheese into a skip. And we would have been losing a lot of money that would have been really hard to recover from.
Oh, all right. So Jason, you're probably taking calls like this from Joe all across the country, right? I mean, you deal with all these British farmhouse cheesemakers. So what was it like on your end?
Well, I think I should just firstly point out, because much of your audience is from the US, that the word skip, if I can translate into American, is actually a dumpster. Anyway,
it's a much better word, by the way. We might also want to clarify that Jamie Oliver is in no relation to John Oliver, even though they're both British and have Olivers. Not everyone in Britain is related. I just want to, for the American audience. But yes.
You're right. There was a lot of cheesemakers in a position very similar to Joe's, and like cheesemakers the world over, it was the soft and blue cheesemakers who suffered the most. Because theirs were not the cheeses that the consumers were buying. But we also were aware that many other cheesemakers had got other wholesale customers that were shut down completely. So their stock actually was even greater than our problem. And so, that was the problem that we faced was a much bigger one that the cheesemakers had. And so the problem that got me getting had me starting to scratch my head was, how do we not just move the cheese that Neal's Yard Dairy's got to sell, that overstock, but how do we move all of the overstock, or as much of the overstock as these cheesemakers have got, as possible? So it was after about sort of a week of turning this over in my mind that I realized the only market for these cheeses was the Great British Public, because while there were shops buying, it wasn't enough it wasn't going to be enough to move this stock. And with the restaurants going, the consumer was the only one really that could help solve this problem. And I flicked through my virtual Rolodex And there's only one name in that virtual Rolodex which popped up as being one that might be able to help reach that community of people that would help us with this problem. And that was in the O section. And so Jamie has been very supportive of our business over the years. And we have a great relationship with him, sold cheese, and he's got a great affinity with the British cheesemakers and other British specialist farmhouse producers of other products.
Yeah.
And so I said, look, there's this short-term problem. It's a grave problem. This cheese needs to be moved, much of it in the next few weeks. Otherwise, it's going to go into the skip. That would be a dumpster. And so, so I said, look, there's only one person that I know that can potentially help us with this. Would you mind giving us a hand? And he's been incredible. He and the whole team have been amazing. And as Joe said, the response, if you have a lot of people who follow your work, and you have that kind of reach, the response actually, albeit that you're cutting lots of small pieces of cheese up into small boxes, if you add them all up after a while, it can actually, you can solve a problem like a ton of cheese being moved. So yeah, it was cool.
So what was the actual total that you sold? I mean, you sold your guess in 3 hours, but how long did this go? How much did you do?
The first box was the one that did sell the quickest, but we rotated 9 cheesemakers through 3 boxes, 3 cheeses in each selection. And so broadly, I think that the total tonnage would be in the region of 13 to 14 tons of cheese that was sold that way. So yeah, there's 8 other producers who've got a similar story to Joe's, and it really did. It's between turning that cheese into money or that just being lost.
That's amazing. So have you also then see, now I assumed everyone in Britain knows their cheese, right? I mean, there's cheddar. It's the world's most famous cheese. I've seen the Monty Python skit. I know how important cheese is to the British public. But then Joe's kind of point is like, they didn't really eat our cheese, or they didn't know. I mean, have you seen this kind of, I don't know if revolution or awakening in the farmhouse British cheese is coming about for the public? Do you think this will continue on?
I think what's been, it shouldn't be eye-opening, but the thing that many people have bought these boxes and have really actually eaten great cheese for the first times in their lives. So they've bought cheese before. They know what cheese is. They've probably bought it in supermarkets, but they didn't know cheese could taste this good. I think what we've realized is that, maybe in our own rarefied little worlds, reaching out to people who already know about cheese, speaking in a language that we and they understand, we might be missing a trick. There's a lot of more people out there who maybe need a little bit of a different approach, whether that's being told what to buy, as they were in this case, maybe giving them, a few more hints about how to serve the cheese, how to maybe cook the cheese, use recipes. And so Jamie's team were really, really helpful in including like an insert which really helps to sort of demystify great cheese for people. So I think a lot of people who bought those boxes will buy great cheese again, where perhaps they might not otherwise have done. So that was I think one of the kind of, one of the really, unexpected but really pleasing things about this exercise was that actually there's a lot more people out there that can eat great cheese, that want to eat great cheese, and how do we go about modifying our approach to make it easier for them, to make it more accessible to them. So that's something that, I find really exciting.
Well, I can tell you as a layman who has trouble with big words, I'd be happy to help when it comes to reaching those people, because I can talk that language. That language I'm great at. Once we get into the chemistry of the cheese and the appreciation on the level that I've watched Joe make cheese, for instance, I fall off a little bit. But, guys, I appreciate you doing this. I love talking to you. I love seeing you guys. Joe, I hope we do see each other face to face soon. I hope 2020 ends with some sort of miraculous get together.
I'm going to come back to Zingerman's because it's been a while since I've seen you, and I want to have another Reuben with a hot dog chaser.
Say the word, brother. I got it right now. Right. Enjoy the day. You got beautiful days.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you very, very soon.
Yeah. All the best.
You too. What I love about Jason and Joe's story is all the new cheese customers that were created out of this crisis that led to a very creative solution. So they turned a lot of people onto cheese, and that's amazing, especially in England, because you figure everyone knows about cheese. But our next story comes from New Orleans. Now, that's certainly a city that's known hardship, challenges, and we think of it as one of the most resilient and strong places in our country. Richard works with the St. James Cheese Company down there, and his network is vast. But let's hear him tell the story. Rachel reached out to you because of your incredibly important role in the New Orleans restaurant scene. And I know that you're probably dealing with a lot of stresses coming at you from all over. But I think what we're really excited to have you on is because I think with example, through example, perseverance, the kinds of stuff that you guys have already done is going to inspire a lot of people who are probably much smaller scale, but in very similar shoes. You know, as a retailer myself, I had no idea how big a percentage cheese sales went to restaurants, like 50 to 70%. Like, it blows my mind, right? And then all of a sudden, like, this all disappears, right? So I know you've been in New Orleans for how many years now?
We opened up in 2006, so it's been 14 years now.
So 14 years, you must know everyone, right? I mean, so how did you build, like, first I assume you just started walking into restaurants with great cheese and go, hey, here's this. If you're interested, here's my card. I'll talk to you soon. Or, I mean, how did that network evolve? How did you develop that?
Well, it was a lot of things. I think part of it was the timing of when we opened the business. We opened the business right after Hurricane Katrina. Nobody was opening anything. I mean, there were places that were reopening, but something new, let alone a cheese shop, which New Orleans really hadn't had before. So it kind of caught a lot of people's attention. So, and in those early years, it kind of got overlooked by a lot of the bigger national distributors and things. And for chefs, we were kind of the only option. And so a lot of them, were coming to us saying, we really want to work on doing a cheese plate. And we're like, great, absolutely, let's do it. And so for a long time, it kind of spread word of mouth like that. At least in a city like New Orleans, where there are lots and lots of restaurants, there's a lot of talent that moves around from one restaurant to the next, or they go off and they open up their own thing. We like to be in a situation where not only are we cultivating a good relationship with one restaurant, but when like the sous chef goes off on his own or he gets hired away, wherever he winds up, he's like, hey, you guys, we really ought to start getting cheese from these guys because, I was with them there and they were great. It's not always like making the sale right there. It's the sale down the road that's kind of helps keeps things rolling a little bit.
Well, I will say a lot of the chefs I've known aren't cheese experts, right? They're incredible cooks and they're ingredients, but they need to rely on an expert to tell them what's the real cheeses they want. Maybe they know a couple of cheeses here and there, but there's so much flavor, so much variety, such a spectrum that I would bet that once they find an expert that they can trust, they never want to let go of you. You know what I mean? So you've got this network that was established, and incredibly, you are probably one of the few folks who has come out of two different crises.
We've been through a couple of hurricanes where we've been knocked out of power for a week or longer, and that has a new set of problems. And this latest crisis, I tell you, has been interesting because how do we reinvent our business model in like 24 hours, so we can start selling cheese again? It's been crazy. It's just been crazy, I think.
It's the shotgun approach. Just throw it all up against the wall, see what sticks, see what works. And if it doesn't work today, try something new tomorrow. Have you, because of this like strong network then, have you been able to reach out to some of those restaurant folks, those bars? Has any kind of like solutions or creativity kind of come from that kind of collaboration? Even though they're like sitting there going, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do too.
The business is built around moving cheese any way we can, whether it's the classic sell you a wedge of cheese or put it in a sandwich or sell it to a restaurant. It's all about how much cheese how can we get the product turning over? How can we get it out and get it into people's mouths? When a lot of those restaurants closed, it was like, well, now what do we do? And one of the things we've stumbled across, which I think a lot of people have, is doing these virtual tastings. We partnered up several weeks ago. I guess it's probably been 6 weeks now, with a restaurant in town here called Commander's Palace. It's one of the city's kind of old guard family-run restaurants that everybody in this part of the world knows You know,
pretty famous.
It's like,
It's pretty famous.
yeah, it's pretty famous. So Commander's Palace has this wonderful wine cellar, and what happened was, and great somms that worked there. And you know, what happened was, is the state fairly early on, when they told restaurants that they had to go to a takeout only model, they allowed restaurants to sell wine basically at retail, which is they're not normally allowed to do, at least not in Louisiana. So all of a sudden, Commander says, "Wow, you know, we've got all this talent, we got all these ideas, we know lots of things about wine, we've got an incredibly deep cellar. Why don't we do these virtual wine tastings? And why don't we call up St. James, because they've been buying cheese from us for years." As of this week, I think we're up to about 500 people per class.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's and and we're now arranging it so that it's not just people in New Orleans, because there was a lot of people just in New Orleans, but we're sending it out to other parts of the state, up to Baton Rouge and to Lafayette and to the North Shore and these places. And that's just been great. And if nothing else, I mean, it's been keeping my wholesale team busy, because they were getting a little bit bored right off the bat, because like all of a sudden it was like from crazy every day to, oh my God, what are we gonna do? So that was something that happened for us and was great.
That's amazing. So you guys you prepare like 500 cheese plates and then people come and pick them up, or are you sending them to the restaurant and people? I mean, how does that work? And I don't need the whole logistics, but
it wouldn't be. I would say your conventional 5 or 8 whatever little portions of cheese. Right. Because obviously, I think cutting and sending out little 1 ounce portions of cheese would be a little bit ridiculous. So in fact, what they tend to get is much larger. I think they typically get around a half a pound. Not a lot of people are going to be able to open up 6 bottles of wine in front of them. So it's more like they get a half a pound of 2 or 3 cheeses, I think. And then there's 2 wines, and it's really marketed as something that you wouldn't necessarily do by yourself, but you would do it, with your spouse, your partner, or whatever. Your family, household, whatever it is. So a lot of times they're actually getting a whole cheese. So I think this week we just did some cheeses from Judy Shad. We did the Flora, her little goat cheese disc. I got something from Tulip Tree. It's like this fresh one with herbs on the outside, and oh man, so really nice cheeses, but they're individually sized. So it's not like we're actually cutting up, we did that the first week and figured out quickly that wasn't going to fly. What happens is Commanders has all these folks that are like looking for stuff to do and waiters. So they hand deliver it around town, in a bag with a box of wine, and they drop it at people's houses. And we've also partnered with a couple of the liquor stores, wine shops in other areas where people can go and pick it up, so they don't have to come into town here. So,
that's awesome.
It's been a learning curve, but it works really smooth now. We're having fun with it.
I mean, what blows me away by that, what I love is New Orleans is a big city, and we've talked to a few shops that have done some similar things, but no one's really seemed to put the network out, and pull in all these not disparate companies, because you deal with them, their clients, their customers, whatever it is, your friends at the very least. But to pull together and do things together is really not something I've really kind of run into yet. A lot of these cheese shops are lucky; they can sell wine too, but so they do it all themselves. But to spread that out across the whole city and enlist all these other people, it benefits everybody. I mean, it seems to benefit the whole city. And if you've got this network going out, that's even going outside the city, my God, your reach is so much more than just your store. That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think social media presence, that's just been so critical, I think, for everybody. The one thing we got going for it is you got a lot of people sitting around at home, looking at their phones and looking at their tablets and just digging for anything to kind of distract them.
This was the first time I finally saw the platform utilized to bring people together and to bring community.
For us, we do a fair slug of mail order around Christmas time, but the rest of the year it's like, an order here, an order there. All things being equal, we have a pretty good following on Instagram. I think we're like 20 some odd thousand, which is not bad. But when the lockdown came, we said, well, first of all, we gotta move some cheese out of here quick. And the next day we said, okay, we're gonna do like a 20% off sale, and blasted that out on Instagram, expecting, okay, we'll get a handful of orders. And it was like a bigger than Christmas. We had orders coming in from people all over the country that were following us on Instagram. that we're like, why on earth? We got our first orders ever from Alaska. And I'm like, oh, damn it. I'm like, how did I forget to turn off shipping to Alaska? Because that got really expensive. But I was like, we got an order from Alaska. I'm like, how does this person know about us to order cheese from us? So it was kind of crazy like that. It really was. And we were just floored by how people just jumped on it in a way.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Richard, I know I can't thank you enough for joining me, man. I've loved talking with you. I am going to assume that if I ever do make it to New Orleans, which is definitely going to happen, you might be able to find me a table or somewhere around. But
it'd be my pleasure to do so. We love having cheese people visit from out of town. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, man. Bye-bye. So there we have it. Another episode of A Case of Good News. I want to thank Joe and Jason and Richard and Rachel for all of the good work that they put into it and for sharing their stories about friendship. I think if there was anything that I learned from it, it's that if you put your faith in the community, you will be rewarded. They want to see us there. They care about us. Even if it's not obvious right now, trust in the folks around you. They care. All right. I'm going to leave you with a joke, and this comes from Lulu and Sayer. They know comedy. Ready? What kind of a cheese would you use to lure a bear, like out of a cave or something? Give up? Camembert. Yeah, it's a groaner, but it's really good. It's really good, especially when you hear from them. All right, Joe. We'll see you next week, okay? The last episode. Bye-bye.